In this class, remember that you are learning a lot of things, but you're sort of building them together intuitively, right? Um, Now, already, even though we didn't separate them out, you've been studying line, you've been studying cross contours, which is kind of like the interior texture of something. You've been studying structure, three-dimensional rendering. So instead of having kind of that list of definitions, I think that it's always better to be where you are as an artist, incorporate all the concepts into your intuition and into your muscle memory and into your body sense of knowledge. Really, just like playing guitar, the only way to progress is to get it into muscle memory and just be able to perform it, right? So keep in mind that you're experiencing all of those concepts, but we're not separating them out. We're building them holistically and we're building them all together. So in this lesson, we're going to work on shading or light. There's many words for it. Um, you've seen Josh's work on the different styles of shadows that exist on a solid. The umbra is the darkest. The penumbra is next to the darkest. Then you have a range of midtones. Then you have the highlight. Then you have this little flash within the highlight that's extra bright, right? Now we can memorize that terminology and we can do a test on it. Um, but I think what's more useful is to always connect it to your body, always connect it to your practice, and always move forward slowly in the presence of observation. So um, so I went on a run today, and we're also going to work on landscape, and we're going to build towards some ideas about perspective. But we want to develop perspective in the same way too, because perspective can be so just conceptual and architectural, and you learn this rule system. And I mean, I found when I learned perspective that I could do perspective drawings, but when I was out making observations, the what I had learned from learning perspective didn't match up with what was really there. So we're always trying to progress slowly with that sense of what seeing what is real in the world and evaluating that, and also with that sense of nurturing and internalizing our own skill until it is emotional and bodily and physical, and not just idea based, right? So okay, so here I went out on a run, and basically I took a picture of just this familiar landscape that we all see in Bend. You can see this everywhere, and then this will probably be and then this will be what your assignment is about. Just taking a walk, taking a landscape picture, and just assessing it. So what we're looking at in this drawing is we're looking for light. Now, in the drawings that you've been doing so far, there's you do a primitive drawing. It's on a white piece of paper. You're just looking at the primitive, and you're like, oh, that's fairly successful. But that kind of drawing is impossible. Like when have you ever seen an object just floating in a blank white space? It doesn't make sense. It's unreal. The basis of our world is light. The basis of I think all life is light, right? Because light is the most primal source of energy for plants, and then animals consume plants, right? So there is no situation ever where you will see things without light, and light is always arranged in a specific way, right? And light always goes in steps. It always goes from light to dark. So before you learn terms like, the umbra and the penumbra and how they interact, I want you to just like look at a picture like this, look at a landscape, go outside, take a walk, and just notice in your environment where it's brighter, where the light starts to fall off and where it gets darker. Um, so I thought this is a really good subject for a drawing because normally the sun is in one place, right? The sun is in one place and it's all just diffuse. So the light kind of falls in these layers. Like, the upper sky might be the brightest. So this might be one layer, right? And it's just these broad sheets. Then, and that's closest to the sun. Depends on the sun's position. If the sun is over here, then the brightness would be over here, right? So pretty logical. Um, Now, normally in diffuse light, it just goes like this, right? It's a kind of perspective. There'll be a layer of bright, kind of here and here, wherever the sun is, and then maybe I'll make that a little bigger. Then in the second layer, this will be uh, this will be a layer of mid-tone, right? So here's where it's medium. It's kind of medium. And then the final piece at the horizon, it'll be darker, right? So this governs kind of the whole landscape. That's not exactly what we're seeing in this picture. We're seeing something a little bit different. But just know that this is kind of the basis of this idea called atmospheric perspective, right? So atmospheric perspective means that the further the distance, the more air is getting in the way, and air is a thing, right? So air will reflect light. So depending on the position of the sun, as you look off in the distance, everything gets gradually lighter or darker. Now this is true if you do some of these exercises at home where you're just setting objects up on a desk and drawing them. If you really look at it, your light you have a light source in your room, and the entire environment will go from lighter to darker in the exact same way, right? Okay, now this might be inverted, right? So it might be that it's extremely bright over here, right? So if the sun were here, then this would be extremely bright. The distance would become bright. This would be the middle again, and then this would be, and then this would be the dark part. Let me just. Okay, so then this part would be darker, right? So that's kind of if the sun were back there. Now this surprisingly is a rule for every drawing. If you take all of these little cubes and cylinders you've been drawing and you just make a scale from light to dark in the background, all of a sudden it will look real. It's the reality that you're missing from almost everything. It's the reality you're missing from some of your autobiographical work, which was just incredible, by the way. But because we live in this mountainous region, there's a lot of pictures of mountains. But kind of the way that most of us drew mountains is just kind of like this, right? Let me see here. Cool. So you have a white page, and then you have whatever pen that you have, and then you have the basic shape of the mountains, and then you have some texture, right? Um, that's great as a symbol of a mountain, but it's almost exactly like progressing a two-dimensional schema, right? You will never see that in real life. What you'll see is within this. I mean, this is right, but you'll also see this, and especially in the snow. The snow reflects a lot of light, so in some way your composition will be darker here. Then it'll be a little less dark, and then back here it'll be light, right? So even with this little mountain symbol, these little kind of symbols of mountains that we have, we are like already it looks breathtakingly real, right? I mean, not breathtakingly real, it's just a scribble, but doing that with everything you draw adds a huge amount of realism. And then you can think about it, okay, the snow is white, right? The snow is lighter, the snow breaks the rules. The outlines just kind of start to disappear. Um, there's clouds up here that change the light. There's and there are runs of snow coming down the mountain. Even though this is a nothing drawing, it just really has a sense of space and shape because of atmospheric perspective. So when you're learning terms, let's do this for atmospheric perspective. Let's say, anywhere you look, everything is going to go from light to dark. And that is atmospheric perspective. That is the thumbnail rule. Um, if you have a more complex definition, that definition could be something like atmospheric perspective is the interposition of air between your view and distance, and depending on the amount of light and the direction of it, your view of the distance will either lighten or darken, right? But we don't need that definition. It's too complex to remember. So what we're going to focus on is that everything you look at will progress in some way from light to dark. And what I would love to see is, even if you are in the future doing little drawings of cones and cylinders and stuff like that, I would love to see you progress the entire drawing from light to dark, and just always remember that. It's a really special rule, and it gives you just like this baseline of realism from the beginning, from the onset. All right, so let's go back to our original reference. And I want to just do a quick analysis here to show you why this is really special. Um, so essentially, the light. Now, first of all, note that, see how I have like this sensation of convergence, right? This is the exact same way we're going to study perspective. We'll talk about this more in depth, but look at any picture you take. See how, like, look, why that cloud is triangular, is kind of flowing over to this point. You know, even these trees seem to sort of converge here, right? The shapes are all kind of converging. This is resisting that. It's going a different direction. But isn't that nice? That's what I mean. Like, we're gonna study construction, perspective, and principles, but it's nice to have the simplest possible version of the knowledge inside your mind as well, so that you kind of can sense it, right? Like, that's why I think the eye line and direction is more important, right? So, oh, I was looking right there. That's about. I'm not that tall, but I'm about that tall. And then this is a camera. And then everything is converging there, and that might be. I mean, how do you construct a tree in perspective? Like, I don't really know, but having the sense of that framework is super helpful. Um, but we will go in depth in perspective in a week or a couple weeks. Um, okay, so atmospheric perspective. So what we're seeing in this image now, this is why this is really interesting to me, is because these clouds up here are sort of forming a little funnel, right? So basically, they're controlling the direction of the light. And this is a very special image because even though these clouds are sort of obeying the rule, they're getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Um, they are, it's pretty modulated by that shape. The light falls through here. And I mean, you can see that really clearly. And then this is bright. This beautiful, bright pool of light. But it's in the middle distance, right? Now, normally without the clouds, um, this would progress and everything would get gradually lighter in steps, right? Okay, so we're just kind of identifying things. Here's the brightest light. Here is middle light, right? This is all kind of middle light. This is all kind of a middle light too. And the darkest we can get is these trees because it's sort of like the back of the tree is in the way of the light. I'll use a different color for that. Right, so this is going to be our blacks. Cool. So now we sort of have a plan for atmospheric perspective for this drawing, right? Everyone that I've seen, gosh, you guys are really good at, everybody in their arsenal has a black color, which is the ink. You have a mid-tone. So maybe I'll just, play with this a little, right? So this is, I'm planning my mid-tone. You have a mid-tone, which is a wash or a watercolor. And you have a light tone, which is the white of the paper. Now, what this is about is all of us in this class, we have really good control over the mid-tone and the black tone because we have ink and then we have whatever we're doing for our wash. But what none of us have control over is the light tone, right? Because it's hard to think negatively about the paper being white. So for most of us, instead of controlling that light tone, we are just leaving it blank. So that is, an essential technique with the materials is understanding that the paper is never blank. If you leave something blank, that's unreal. That's not in this physical dimension, right? Um, and so so controlling the material and using the white of the paper as the brightest tone. That's one task, and that is a very physical task and very intuitive. And a conceptual task is understanding why you would do that. Um, it's sort of like if you don't understand this, then it sounds like a drawing teacher is just saying, just paint the background black, just fill in the background, and you don't know why you're doing it, right? But if you are really interested in realistic drawing and drawing from observation, and also connecting your creative practice with your real experience, then this is really important. It's really important for you to realize that you will never see anything on a white background ever. That's it's impossible. You'll never see anything floating in space in a lightless void. It doesn't make sense, right? So if you're thinking about, maybe that's the best kind of way to think about those Platonic ideas, right? That even if you think that Plato had the right idea, those things don't exist, and we can never really experience them. So if you can think about this, like rendering the space around your objects, even conceptual objects, even abstract schema, you are dragging those objects out of the world of thought, out of the world of Plato, and placing them in your world, right? And that's what drawing is about: is connecting, your internal, mental, and psychological and emotional experience with your real experience. And it has two directions. It's like you're either you're observing things. If you closely paint a bookshelf or something like that, you're pulling those things into your emotional experience and making them more real for you. But you can also be imagining things and pulling them out into the real world of the drawing. And a drawing exists halfway in between. It mitigates those two worlds. That's why it's so beautiful. That's why it's so powerful. And that's why, even if you are not into art, you will connect with that basic idea that your private, interior, imaginative world can be pulled out of you and can exist in the real world, right? And that the real itself, the real world, everything you see around you can become part of your psychological and emotional experience. Um, okay, so we have sort of the basic setup for this drawing. And let's stop here and go over to the ink.